God has given us wisdom to do what we need to do. But we still have to remember that God controls it all. He knew this was going to happen before we even came into existence, because nothing catches God by surprise. So we as believers need to walk like we know the God that we serve. Exercise wisdom, but walk like we know the God that we serve. He's Alpha, He's Omega. Somebody say that. He's Alpha. He's Alpha and Omega. He's the beginning and the end. Give God some praise. You are Alpha and Omega.
Aram was warring against Israel, and he counseled with his servants, saying, in such and such a place shall be my camp. Now, by the time you get to these verses, the king of Aram is at war with the king of Israel. So the king of Aram says to his servants, I am going to set up an ambush for the king of Israel. He makes this plan and he only shares it with his servants. Verse 9, the man of God, this speaks of Elisha, the man of God sent word to the king of Israel saying, beware that you do not pass this place, for the Arameans are coming down there. That means that when the king of the Arameans made a plan to destroy God's people, God's prophet named Elisha supernaturally intervened and said to the king of Israel, make sure that you don't go to that place because an ambush is waiting on you. Verse 10, the king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God had told him. Thus he warned him so that he guarded himself there more than once or twice. That means that the king of Israel listened to the prophet Elisha, and instead of his people being destroyed, his people were saved because he had the foresight to listen to the servant of God. I want to begin a three-part series this morning entitled, Somebody Prayed for Me. Somebody prayed for me. The ministry of Elisha is one of the most significant in the entire Bible. He is not mentioned for the first time in 2 Kings. He is actually mentioned for the first time in 1 Kings chapter 19. Elisha is what you would call a spokesman or a mouthpiece for God. In the Old Testament, they were referred to as either prophets or prophetesses. Prophetess was the female version of the male prophet, and they are both mentioned over and over again in the Old Testament. For our next 3 times together that we get to spend together, I want to focus on the ministry of Elisha in this single chapter alone. Beginning in verse 8 down through verse 10, we find that God supernaturally spoke to the prophet Elisha. Elisha then sent word to the king of Israel, and Israel was spared from destruction because instructions were followed. Maybe you missed that. Israel was spared from destruction because instructions were followed. And the problem with a whole lot of us is we don't like to follow instructions. Amen. And consequently, various aspects of our lives are in destruction because we don't want to follow instructions. Okay, nobody's willing to be honest. But if you would be honest, you would have to testify that something in your life right now is not where it should be because you didn't follow instructions. One of the strangest things I used to do, I don't do this anymore, Auntie Bonnie, but I used to do this. I would go to the doctor complaining of something. The doctor would put me on medication. The doctor would always give the instruction that even if you start feeling better after taking this medication, don't stop taking the medication. Keep taking it until the medication is complete, so that whatever your symptoms are do not return. And you know what I did. I used to, the old version of with me. Kevin 1.0. This is 2.0 now. But Kevin 1.0 would take the medication, then I'd start feeling better, and then I would put the medication aside. Then the symptoms would come back. Then I'd go back to the same doctor. And confession, they say, is good for the soul. So I'm going to go and confess and keep it 100 this morning. I'd go back to the doctor and I'd say to him, you know that medication you gave me didn't work? That was just part of the truth. The whole truth is the medication would have worked if I would have taken the medication the way that it had been prescribed. Israel was able to save themselves from destruction because they followed instruction. And I want to encourage you today from 2 Kings chapter 6 of how important it is to walk in the instructions of God. And I want to take that theme and break it into several pieces that I believe are contained in this text. Here's the first piece that I want to break off this morning. It is this: God still speaks. The same God who spoke in 2 Kings chapter 6 is the same God who is speaking in 2020. God still speaks.
All right.
Which means you do not have to live this life without a sense of direction. Some people are like a cork bobbing around in the sea. No stability, no sense of direction. Every morning you're trying to figure out who you are. Now that might be okay when you're 6. At the age of 6, you don't know if you want to be a firefighter, a superhero, a police officer, a doctor, an attorney. That might be fine at the age of 6. But when you're 26, 36, 46, 56, with grandkids, you can't be waking up in the morning trying to figure yourself out. You need to have a sense of direction. God still speaks. Not only does this text prove that God still speaks, this text also proves that God still speaks through people. He still speaks through people. It is because of the ministry of Elisha, one of the principal or primary personalities in 2 Kings chapter 6. It is because of the ministry of Elisha serving as a mouthpiece on behalf of God that Israel was saved from destruction. God still speaks, and God still speaks through people. So what's the first one? God still speaks. What's the second? God still speaks through people. Let me give you a warning. And it is this: make sure that you're listening to the right person.
Amen.
Because not only does God still speak, and not only does God still speak through people, the devil speaks too. And the devil speaks through people. And sometimes the devil speaks through people who pretend to be speaking on behalf of God. And you've got to learn how to know the difference. Make sure that you're listening to the right person. Pastor Thorpe, how do you know that you're listening to the right person? Well, the first way that you know that you're listening to the right person is when the Word confirms it. When the Word confirms it. When Paul wrote to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 4, he did not tell him to preach CNN. He did not tell him to preach NBC, ABC, MSNBC, or Fox News. Paul told Timothy to preach the Word. He warned Timothy that the reason you need to preach the word is because a day will come when people will not desire to hear the word. Watch this. Some people want to hear a word, they just don't want to hear the word. They want to hear something that makes them feel comfortable. They want to hear something that says to them, you can live any way you want to live. You can do anything you want to do, and things will still turn out okay for you. If you want to know whether or not what someone is saying is from God, make sure that it lines up with the Word of God. Hey, can I warn you? It is hard for you to determine whether or not what someone is saying agrees with the Word of God if you don't know the Word of God. If you don't know the Word for yourself, it's hard for you to identify whether or not what you're hearing is actually in line with the Word. I've been in church all my life, and I done heard a heap of people lie in church. I done heard a heap of people stand up on the Lord's behalf and say things that are nowhere in the Bible, and we accept them as true. God said, if you make one step, He'll make two. Where did He say that at? Nowhere in the Bible. And some of us got bumper stickers. You make one step, God will make two. Nowhere in the Bible. So if you're going to identify the word when you hear it, you need to know the word for yourself. So you can know when someone is speaking on God's behalf when the word confirms it. Hey, here's a second way you can know when someone is speaking on God's behalf. You ready for it? When your spirit agrees with it. When your spirit agrees with it. Now here's where the warning comes in. Here's where growth and development come in. There is a difference between your spirit and your flesh. According to Romans chapter 8 and verse 16, the Spirit of God identifies with our spirit to confirm for us that we are the children of God. God's Spirit identifies with our spirit. And here's what you need to always question when you're making decisions and when you're taking in information. Does this agree with my spirit from God's Spirit, or am I walking in my flesh? Now, I'm about to tell you something. I don't want you to do anything about it. Somebody hurt none of y'all in here, not even anybody in this city, or another city. Somebody hurt my feelings this week. If we were in a television studio, somebody would hold up a sign, and the sign would say, So, I'm going to say it again, that somebody hurt my feelings, and then I want y'all. Okay. So this week, and that's hard to do. It's hard, brother. It's hard to get next to me. It's hard to bother me. Because I've seen a lot of stuff. I've dealt with a lot of things. Amen. All right, so I'm going to say this again and see if y'all are with me. This week, somebody hurt my feelings. Now, some of my more gangster saints, they want to see me after church to find out who it was, what they did, where I can find them.
All right, D, let's go.
So somebody said some things, did some things to hurt my feelings. And my first response was, I am cutting them off.
All right.
See? That's why we in church. It's exactly why we in church. This is exactly why we in church. Because my first thought was, I ain't done nothing to them. All I've done is hope them.
All right.
Hope is the past tense of help.
Yeah.
All I've done is hope them. And they've done something to hurt me. And my first response was, I am cutting them off. I felt justified in cutting them off. But then the Lord spoke and said, get in line with what you preach.
All right.
And the Lord made me ask myself the question, is that your spirit or is that your flesh? And then the Lord pushed me a step further, Sister Lisa. He pushed me a step further. He said, how many times have you blown it on me? And what if I cut you off the way you're planning to cut them off? And Crystal, you know what I'm still trying to do? Because it's still unresolved as I stand here today. I want to walk in the Spirit and not walk in my flesh. I want to utilize God's wisdom. Because sometimes God can hit a straight lick with a crooked stick. So if you want to know whether or not someone is speaking on the Lord's behalf, if you are listening to the right person, number one, you can tell when the Word confirms it. But number two, you can tell when your spirit agrees with it. Not your flesh, but your spirit. Hey, here's a third way that you can tell when someone is speaking on God's behalf or when you're listening to the right person. When their track record proves it. See, I don't have a problem taking constructive criticism as long as it is coming from someone who has constructed something. Because God uses people with a track record. Hey, watch what you find in verse 1 through verse 7 about Elisha's track record. What kind of history did he have? Watch verse 1. Now the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, behold now, the place before you where we are living is too limited for us. This means that Elisha was the chief prophet. There were other prophets under him. And what they were saying was, there are so many of us until we have outgrown our living space. Verse 2. Please let us go to the Jordan, and each of us take from there a beam. And let us make a place there for ourselves where we may live. So he said, go. Y'all want to cut down some new trees? Get some new beams? Build us a new place? He said, go. Watch verse 3. Then one said, please be willing to go with your servants. And he answered, See, the Bible is very practical. They said, we need a bigger house. We want to go cut down some trees. They wanted to know what his opinion was. He said, good idea. Go. Cut you some trees down. And then they said, Reverend, do you mind going with us? He said, you know what? I'll go. Watch this. In order for prophets to speak on God's behalf, prophets have to be listening to God's voice. Did you hear what I said? In order for a prophet to speak on the Lord's behalf, they have to be listening to the Lord's voice. And so when the people asked him, can we cut down some trees? Elisha said, Lord, can we cut down some trees? And the Lord said, yeah, cut down some trees. So he said to them, go ahead on, cut down some trees. Then they said, we want you to come with us. Elisha turns to God and said, Lord, is all right with you if I go with them? And the Lord said, go on with them. So according to verse 3, Elisha agrees to go. Watch verse 4. So he went with them. And when they came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. Oh, this all sounds so normal, so calm, so serene. They cut down trees. Verse 5 starts with a word. It lets you know the dynamic of the story is changing. Verse 1 through verse 4, everybody's praying, everybody's listening to God. But when you get to verse 5, there's a but. And somebody last week was doing good Monday through Tuesday. But when Wednesday showed up, a but came with it. Somebody was doing all right this morning. But something has pricked your heart since you've been in service. Especially when I started talking about the difference between the flesh and the spirit. Because you done cut some people off and you was getting ready to rejoice in the fact that you cut them off. You got a whole list of people you done cut. And you say, preach, Pastor, I'm cutting all of them off just like you cutting them people off. And then the Lord flipped that thing on and dropped a butt right in your lap in church.
Hallelujah.
But as one was felling or cutting down a beam, the axe head fell into the water. And he cried out and said, alas, my master, for it was borrowed. The man cutting down the tree, as he was cutting down the tree, the head of the axe fell off the axe handle, and he cried out to Elisha because the axe didn't belong to him in the first place. Now see, here's the difference between some of us and some of your cousins. If that would have been some of us, Bro Reg, and we had borrowed something from somebody, and we tore up their stuff or lost their stuff, we would feel bad because we have respect for ourselves, we have respect for other people, we have respect for other people's property. It would bother us. Some of your cousins, they could have lost your axe, your chainsaw, your rake, your lawnmower, burnt your house down, and it wouldn't have bothered them a bit. But this man, being a man of integrity, was bothered because he had lost an axe head that was borrowed. Then the man of God said, where did it fall? And when he showed him the place, he cut off a stick and threw it in there and made the iron float. Because when, according to verse 5, the head of the axe fell into deep water, which means you couldn't even see the head of the axe because the water was so deep. And Elisha said, show me the proximity of where you last saw what you lost. Elisha said, show me the general area of where you last saw what you lost. Okay? Somebody in here today lost something. But if you can remember the general area where you lost it, you and God can go back and get it. So, the junior prophet said to the senior prophet, here is where I lost the axe head. And Elisha goes over, according to verse 6, cut off a stick, threw it in there, and made the iron float. The King James Version says the axe head swam. Elisha took a stick, threw the stick in the general vicinity of where it had been lost. And God took something that ordinarily could not move and made it swing. Okay, I thought the shout would be different. Because what is there in your life that appears to be so lifeless and immobile, but God can make it swing? Verse 7, he said, take it up for yourself. So he put out his hand and took it up. Hey, if I was preaching all of this, I'm just hitting this part. But if I was preaching all of this, I would have to say that in some of your restoration, God doesn't do everything for you. There's some things you have to do for yourself. Okay. Real Bible readers will recognize that this Old Testament record has a New Testament parallel. The prophet Elisha said to the under prophet, where did you lose the axe head? He showed him where the axe head had been lost. Elisha throws in a stick, makes the iron float, but then says to the junior prophet, you pick it up and put it back on the hammer. Sounds a lot like John chapter 11, when Jesus showed up after Lazarus had been dead 4 days. And Jesus said, show me where you laid it. They took him to the general vicinity where the tomb was located. Then Jesus said, roll away the stone. And then instead of him throwing a stick at Lazarus, he threw a prayer at his father and said, Lazarus, come forth. Immediately a 4 days dead Lazarus emerges from the grave. And Jesus says, I have done all that I can do. Now it's time for you to do something. Loose him. Let him go. And somebody in this room, your axe head is already floating. The Lord is just waiting on you to pick it up. The reason they could trust Elisha in 8 through 10 is because he had a track record in 1 through 7. And you need to hang out with people and listen to people who have a track record. In these next 2 minutes, and I'm headed out, the most important lessons I have ever learned, I learned them from preachers. Now I know in 2020, preachers ain't what they used to be. Be first. Preachers ain't what they used to be. People ain't what they used to be either. But preachers ain't what they used to be. You remember the time that if somebody was drinking a beer and they walked by a church, they would hold the beer down till they got past the church. Yeah. You remember the time where people would say to each other, you better be glad we standing on church ground. That's what people used to say. Oh yeah. None of y'all knew, some of y'all cousins will cuss you out right in church on a microphone. Thug that saints. But the most important lessons that I have ever learned in this life, I learned them from preachers. Because when a person is led by the Spirit of God and what they say lines up with the Word of God and their commitment to people has established a track record, you ought to listen to what it is they have to say. And I promise you, we will continue to see destruction if we don't start listening to some instruction. So let me just name, this is not my list of favorite preachers. That would take me all day to give you a list of favorite preachers. But I do want to mention some preachers by name who have had an enormous impact on my life because of things that they have said. One of those first preachers would be Reverend Dr. Jasper Williams Jr., who has the unique gift of looking into a biblical text and allowing you to be transported to wherever the text took place. Jasper Williams, one of the things he was known for years ago, if he was preaching about a biblical character, he would show up in the pulpit dressed like the biblical character. Robe and sandals with the staff in his hand. And the ministry of Jasper Williams has meant a whole lot to me. The ministry of C.L. Franklin, Clarence LaVaughn Franklin, who was the father of Aretha Franklin. His ministry has meant so much to me. In the very early years of his ministry, C.L. Franklin had no formal biblical education. He was not a graduate of Morehouse School of Religion. He was not degreed, but he had been with Jesus. And he knew how to take a text, and with the gift of his voice, he could transform any church setting into a miraculous place where the Word of God could be understood. Then there's another preacher, Reverend Dr. Joel Cliff Gregory, that I highly admire because of his ability to take illustrations and stories and tie them to the Word of God so that you could see the Word on the written page, but you could see it in your heart because he had painted such a clear picture for you. Then there's a preacher that I get to watch quite often on Christian television, and that's Joyce Meyer. And one of the things I love about her preaching is that her preaching is practical. It's down to earth. You can apply it to daily common activities. There's a local preacher right here in this community. Dr. Thomasina Adams is one of the most gifted preachers I have ever heard. She was challenged one day to speak at an event where the subject matter was the crisis of the black family. And the first thing she said when she stood up is who told you the black family was in a crisis? I said, that's my kind of preaching right there. This is going to be a good argument. This is going to be a great discussion. And then Reverend Dr. Arjanae Pitts Murdoch, she preached for us for my 20th anniversary celebration. And the first time I heard her was at the church of Reverend Dr. Jasper Williams, where she talked about her dog, Sparkle. And Sparkle started scratching uncontrollably. So she took Sparkle to the vet. And the vet said to her, your dog has fleas. She said, now, I got a problem with my dog having fleas. Because my dog is not a yard dog. My dog is a house dog. To which the veterinarian responded, are there any times where you allow your dog to be around other dogs? She said, well, in order for my dog to get good exercise, I take my dog to the dog park. And the veterinarian said, what has happened to your dog is, even though your dog didn't have fleas, your dog has been around somebody else's dog that did have fleas. And if you hang out with somebody who got something, you hang out with it long enough and you'll end up with it yourself. I say, that's my kind of preaching right there. I can deal with that because that says to me, I got to be careful what I hang out with. I got to be careful who I hang around with. Then Dr. Adrian Rogers, who pastored for decades in the city of Dallas, Texas, one of the most gifted orators the world has ever seen, who had the ability to take any biblical passage and break it into pieces and hand you each piece in a way that you could take it with you when the service was over. On and on I could go to Martin Luther King Jr., Charles Stanley, Gardner Calvin Taylor, Reverend Dr. Matt King Carter, and it would take me a whole book to tell you all of the words of comfort and instruction that my own pastor, Reverend David A. Lattimore Jr., has placed into my heart. What are you getting at, Pastor Thorpe? You is what you eat. You is what you eat. And if all of your favorite preachers are only your favorite preachers because they say catchy stuff that sounds good in church, but you can't live it when you get home. And we've gotten into this age where celebrity status has taken us over. But it's stuff you can listen to, but you can't live. And I want to hang out with people who got something to say that when I get home, it changes the way that I live. And the reason some of your co-workers don't want to come to your church is because you come every week, but you act the same every time you get back to your department. And the Lord wants to be using the word to change you and to change you on a regular basis. Which means somebody prayed for me, but somebody preached to me. And if you don't know it by now, on a regular basis, you need a word from the Lord. You got some decisions you're going to have to make. You need to be able to hear God clearly. You got some relationships you're going to need to decide on. You need to be able to hear God clearly. You've got some investment opportunities that you're going to be able to make. You need to be able to hear God clearly.
All right.
Because if you make the wrong decision, end up in the wrong relationship, miss out on a good investment or make a bad investment, it may take you the next 20 years to try and undo what you did. And all the people say, amen.